Considering how many exercise science studies there are on drop sets, rest periods, and intensity techniques, it's kind of weird that no one's made an actual study on MYO reps before. I couldn't wait for the fellow pencil necks to make it, so last March I did it myself. I made a study and I used myself as the participant to see if MYO reps were the secret to huge, massive guns. A straight set is what most people think of when they think of performing an exercise. You do your set, you rest, and then you go again whenever you're ready. However, in a MYO set, or a MYO rep set, however you want to say it, you elongate the time spent at high motor unit recruitment, or the most important part of the lift. High motor unit recruitment is so important for hypertrophy because when you have the highest level of motor unit recruitment, that's when the biggest muscle fibers are activated. So the theory goes, if you can keep those muscle fibers activated more often, then you will get even larger. When performing MYO reps, you pretty much cram all the effective reps, the ones at very high motor unit recruitment, into a smaller time frame. The biggest pro and con of MYO reps is time. With MYO reps, you can save a lot of time in the gym because you're cramming all those sets and reps into a smaller time frame. However, people also worry that because you aren't resting as long, you won't be able to perform as well, and thus your muscle gains will go down. Now that you got some background information, here's how I ran the study. After taking my initial flexed arm measurements, because I obviously don't have access to expensive MRI machines or anything like that, I trained my left arm using MYO reps and my right arm using straight sets over 20 sessions and 7 weeks. I trained the MYO arm first with one long MYO set of typically one normal set followed by 3 mini sets or 3 cluster sets. Basically, it's just those high effective, high motor unit recruitment reps. I stopped performing those mini sets once the final set, the final mini set repetitions was one less than the original mini set. So for example, if I got 4 reps on my first mini set and then I got 4 on my second, but then on my third I got 3, I would stop at that set. I trained my right arm with a very simple procedure. It was just 3 straight sets with 3 minutes of rest. I did dumbbell preacher curls 3 times a week with at least 48 hours of rest in between. And by the way, I trained every single set, including the mini sets, to failure. Here's my results. Both my arms grew, and interestingly, they both gained the same amount of max repetitions. My left arm, the MYO arm, went from 9 reps to 14 reps at the same weight, while the traditional arm, my right arm, went from 8 reps to 13. I tracked my performance of each set of every single session, and I know I was only using a whopping 12.5 pounds, okay? Don't make fun of me. But despite that, I still continually increased my maximum repetitions. Clearly, both methods were effective. You'd think that straight sets would be better for strength, but in reality, I actually saw the exact same amount of increase in maximum repetitions. So at least for bicep curls, odds are it's really not that different when you're already varying your rep range. So what does all this information even mean? Basically, they both worked well. They both grew my arms, they both got me stronger, and I had a lot of fun doing it. You could argue that, when you have cigarettes for arms, anything will make them grow, and you'd pretty much be right, but keep in mind that because my arms are so small, there should be an even bigger disparity if there was one. So the fact that my arms grew about the same is even better evidence that there's probably not that big of a difference going on here. Of course, I have to mention the fact that the traditional group did appear to have a tiny, tiny, tiny edge on the MYO rep group. However, because I was using a tape measure, which is, not the most accurate and is at the fault of my own, there's a very high likelihood that these numbers could be just ever so slightly wrong. And when it's down to the 0.1 mark, it's like grasping at straws. There's effectively no real difference. If we look at the volume table, which is sets times reps times weight, we can see that the MYO group actually performed 8.23% less volume throughout the whole entire study. But the MYO group saw effectively the exact same hypertrophy and strength benefits. So this means that overall volume, sets times reps times weight, is probably not as important as overall volume of effective reps, or those high motor unit recruitment reps I was talking about earlier. I do have to note though that the evidence for that claim is not the strongest. It was only 8.23% less, and earlier in the study there were some days where the MYO group actually performed more volume. So there may not have really been that big a difference in overall sets times reps times weight. Although I think it's pretty safe to say that the last couple repetitions of any given set are by far the most important, I think this study also shows that those earlier reps are not doing nothing. And this is because I often had to perform 4 total sets for the MYO group, which was one, I guess you could call it a straight set, followed by 3 mini sets. However, in the traditional group, I only performed 3 straight sets. Basically, this means that 1 mini MYO set is not equal to 1 straight set, despite cutting out all the so-called, useless junk volume reps. If 1 mini MYO set was equal to 1 straight set, then we would have expected my left arm to grow more than my right arm, because for 7 weeks straight, it was receiving more volume in a very recoverable environment. However, that just wasn't the case. So while I can't give you an exact ratio, I can tell you that while 1 MYO set is close to 1 straight set, it's not 1-to-1. One final thing I wanted to touch on is just because my reps were falling some days does not mean I was overtrained. When you're doing the same exercise 3 times a week, you aren't always going to be seeing increases. I also did these after the rest of my training, which was already after school, so things like stress, sleep, fatigue from the day, these all could have impacted how my session went that day. What's far more important is my overall trend, which increased. I saw 5 repetition max increase from the beginning to the end of the experiment. What would have been concerning is if my reps started decreasing and then they decreased more and they weren't coming back. That would likely be a sign I was overtraining. So I pretty much found that MYO reps and straight sets were pretty similar for muscle growth and strength. So what does this mean you should do? If you're short on time, feel free to use MYO reps. For things where you can't easily adjust the weight, like a stack-loaded machine or a cable, using MYO reps can be a great way to save time. I never recorded any specific time it took me to complete my sets throughout the study, but I can tell you for sure, MYO reps took less time than straight sets. Find ways to reduce or use your rest time for something else. Unless you really love MYO reps, don't only do MYO reps. They are very fatiguing and very demanding, especially if you do it on bigger things like compounds. I mean, like MYO rep preacher curls, yeah, I was fine. But MYO rep deadlifts, I guess if you really want that for yourself. There isn't anything magical about either straight sets or MYO reps. Basically, if you train your muscle hard, it's gonna grow. If you want to see my full write-up, I'll leave it in the description. I'm actually waiting to hear back from YGS, a junior researching publisher, to see if they'll take me, which I really hope they do. And that's all I have for you guys today. Have a good day.